We'll get going. So welcome everyone. Those of you that we know from being part of the Madefor community, welcome. It's great to see you again. And those that are new to Madefor, welcome. And those that maybe just saw an ad for this and joined, welcome to you as well. We're excited to host these base camps and to put these on. Andrew and I have been doing these every month now for quite some time. And really we view these as an opportunity to dive into an area of science or story or practical experience, but ultimately to distill out the actionable steps that you can put into practice to help bring out your best to the world around you and bring out the best in those that are around you as well. And so this is always maybe certainly the favorite part of my month, but I know Andrew enjoys these as well. And today we get to welcome a special guest, Blessing Offor, who we'll talk a lot about over the course of the next hour and learn so much from his story. He's got so many gems, but I'm excited to share your story with everyone that's here. Blessing. So welcome.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
And Andrew, welcome as always. So I will maybe I'll set the stage a little bit and then we'll just dive in. And typically, as we always do with these base camps, we'll talk for about 40 minutes. We're going to visit some stories, talk about some science, and then we'll open up to questions. So if you have questions at any point, just throw them up in the chat and we'll make sure we get to those. So Blessing is someone that came into my life a couple of years ago when a mutual friend of ours, a songwriter in Nashville, sent over a track that he and Blessing were working on. And he said, man, you've got to hear this guy. His voice is just so powerful, so amazing. And just last night, our friend Ross sent a note to me and he said that Blessing represents the truest translation of the heart through the voice and the hands. And I think for a musician and for a songwriter, there's probably no better compliment. So I'm just so excited that you're here today, Blessing. I know you've got a whole list of accolades behind you and things that we could talk about, but I'd love to just start with your story. So can you tell us where you were born and then how you ended up getting to Nashville and doing what you do today?
So funny story. I was born in Nigeria, in the southeastern part of the country, in a small, really village called Imo. The state is called Imo State. The city is called Owerri, and the village is called Ekomu. So when I tell you it is a speck in the universe, it's just a very, very tiny place, even in the scale of Africa. It's just middle of nowhere. So born youngest of 6 with congenital glaucoma, so glaucoma, Andrew, I'm sure can help us, is essentially just like an issue with the pressure of the eye, and eventually just theoretically, if it goes unchecked, crushes the optic nerve. The eye is incredibly sensitive. So I was born blind in my left eye, had vision in my right eye. Weirdly enough, my grandmother, as family lore goes, first noticed that I wasn't tracking visually. So she said to somebody, like, when he's looking at you with his face kind of at a 45-degree angle. So she noticed that I was looking with my right eye because my left eye had no vision. So it was really her that kind of brought it to everybody's attention. But there wasn't much you could do at that point. I was like 2 or 3 and generally just like a happy kid. So my uncle is a kind of a well-known soccer player in Nigeria. He played for the Nigerian national soccer team. So around when I was being born, he was kind of at the height of his career in like 89, 90, 91. He was internationally active and playing. And so he ended up coming to America to play for a bunch of universities out here. So around when I was 4, 5, 6, he was just like, we should bring Blessing to America to treat and save the vision in the right eye. So that was kind of the initial impetus for coming to the States, was to retain the vision in the right eye. So lo and behold, we come to America, go to Yale, just luck into just some of the finest ophthalmologists and retinal specialists possibly in the world. they are able to save the vision in the right eye. So that is was good. And then in the summer of, I believe it was fourth and fifth grade, fifth and sixth grade, freak accident. I'm in my backyard playing with friends, and as one does, kid takes a water gun and just utterly in fun sprays all of us, sprays all our friends just like one after the other. And the stream from a just huge super soaker hits the right eye. And in order to maintain the vision in the right eye, we'd had different kind of instruments put in to stabilize the vision, to help kind of maintain the vision. So the last thing the eye needed was a giant stream of water kind of getting in there and throwing everything out of whack, which is exactly what happened. And in the process, it detached the retina in the right eye. So progressively over the next couple of years, I lost most of the vision in the right eye, which is kind of where it is now. Around the same time, we got a piano at the house. Now, I used to, up until that point, I knew I had an interest in music. My family also knew I had like a little toy piano that I would noodle a lot, and they were like, wow, Blessing's learning songs, the cliche story of a kid kind of picking chords and melodies out. But I didn't really think much of it. In fact, I had a friend in third grade who did karate, and I was like, man, I really want to be Chuck Norris. Like that was my childhood dream. I was like, I'm going to be, Walker, Texas Ranger or something. And my uncle, who I came to the States with, he was like, Blessing, I'm not letting people kick you in the face. Like, that's not happening. And I thought he was the meanest person in the world. I was like, you don't love me at all. You don't want me to be happy, as a kid would. And then he started trying to get me to take piano lessons. And I was like, I think the piano's stupid. I don't want to play piano. And he was, Blessing, you're playing piano. And just hilarious to look back on now. And as the vision was getting worse, we got a piano in the house, and I was able to put all that energy into practicing and fell in love deeply with the piano. And then started taking lessons seriously, and took a couple of years of jazz lessons. And that was pretty much it. At that point, I was like in middle school, and enough teachers had taken notice that they were kind of shuttling me between this teacher and this school and this, special program, this, that, and the other thing. There's something I grew up in Connecticut, a program called Talented and Gifted for people who are academically and artistically kind of advanced. So I went from middle school through high school in those kinds of programs. And eventually I was like, man, I'm gonna be a songwriter, which sounds perfectly normal, but like a family like mine, the cliche like immigrant story, you don't just be a songwriter. That's not a career. So you're supposed to be a lawyer, you're supposed to be something that is stable and steady and guarantees income. And my uncle is an attorney, so that was kind of the natural path. So I remember the conversation with my parents where I was like, I'm gonna be a songwriter. And they're like, that's not a real thing. And so for a while, I think everybody was like, let's let him get this out of his system, and then he'll go back to school for, poli-sci, and then go to law school. So I did 2 semesters at Belmont University in Nashville. Really quickly discovered that while I was supposed to be writing English papers, I was writing songs, and my heart wasn't in academics, like in the structured sense of the word, which is really weird because I've read more books now than I ever did when we were paying $45,000 for me to be in school, technically learning. So I stopped after 2 semesters, and I was just like, I gotta figure this out. And so my uncle kind of agreed to let me self-college myself, put myself through 3 some odd years of lessons and whatever else I could to be ready to support myself. And so I moved to New York, and he said, okay, well, after a while, you would have graduated college, so I'm just gonna let you fend for yourself. So at that point in New York, I started playing sessions, teaching lessons, like whatever paid. For a while, I was answering phones at an insurance firm. Weirdly enough, that nobody knows that. You guys don't tell anybody that. So for 3 years in, I did The Voice. which is a lot of what people know of me. And then after The Voice, I realized that things were happening enough that I think New York didn't quite feel like home anymore. And meanwhile, Nashville was changing. So I came back to Nashville in the summer of 2015. And slowly but surely, here we are, little by little.
It's an amazing journey and blessing. And you shared something with me last week when we were talking, that you had done all of this work, all this preparation, and you had your big moment on the big stage, and The Voice is obviously just a small footnote in your journey, but that you were in this position where you had maximum attention and you had done all this work to perform. And on the day or the time of your performance, your monitors went out, right? And so you couldn't actually, not only like the thing that you rely on most, your sense of hearing, you couldn't hear yourself.
It's Pat, it's hilarious in hindsight. Really funny. In the moment, I was like, well, that was fun. You know what I mean? It was like, so pre what are called, ironically enough, the blind auditions, you have a sound check. And I remember in sound check, because I'm really meticulous, I said, okay, guys, so this is how this is going to be the day of, right? And they're like, yeah, nothing's going to change. I said, okay, sounds good. Sounds great. Everything was wonderful. And, you know, the best laid plans of mice and men. Cameras are rolling. I get on stage and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. And I remember sitting at the piano going, okay, don't hit the button because it'll make a noise. So I should have hit the button, really. And then I start playing piano and nothing was coming out of anything. You know what I mean? And they gave us a big speech the night before. They said, if you stop, you're immediately disqualified. So I was like, wow, okay. So I have a really, really good pitch, a sense of pitch. So I was like, I think D flat, which is the key the song is in, is kind of like here in my voice. So, but I was a quarter tone sharp. So when you hear that audition, you hear a lot of rub. And that's because in my Hail Mary attempt, I guessed the key and I was very close, but not quite. And that audition sounded, with no exaggeration, atrocious, okay? So it's really funny because people are very well-meaning and most people honestly can't tell the difference. And I think when people come up to you and go, you sounded amazing on your audition, I think they really actually mean it because most people couldn't tell, right? But I always know how good a musician somebody is when they go, hey man, you know, I saw that audition, like, yeah, that happened. And that's when they become my friend immediately because I know they're telling the truth. What they were trying to say is, that sounded horrible. And I was like my respect for that person goes skyrocketing because the other response is, dude, you were amazing. And when someone says you were amazing, they're either tone deaf, which is fine, they can't help it, or they don't know how to give you a non-answer. And there's a way to say, dude, I saw you on TV. And then just leave that.
Leave it at that. Oh my God.
Just let that be.
That's funny. You know, Blessing, one of the things that you shared, and I think it comes across in just the story that you told in your journey from Nigeria to Yale, to ultimately to Nashville and to New York, and then back to Nashville, is that your mention of your visual impairment was just a very small part of that story. It was you constrained it to, there was a super soaker and it hit my eye, and then I was off, and then I got a piano and I was super excited. And you said something to me that I thought was very profound. And you said that a disability is when you lose interest in the world. Everything else is just a unique experience.
Yeah, I said that.
You did.
Wow.
I wrote it down. So I assume you said it.
I hope so. That's really great. I'll take that.
It's powerful. I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about that. And then I want to go to Andrew, because Andrew and I were talking about what happens when parts of our systems get shut down and how that's actually a superpower, and it actually unlocks more capacity in us. But I'd love to hear in your words, when you hear that statement that you said reflected back to you, what does that mean to you?
I would say that I always say to people that when people go, oh my God, I don't know how you do it. And unpacking the statement, I don't know how you do it. What is behind that statement is something along the lines of sight is the most important thing in the world. How can you live without it, right? When really the most important thing in the world is whatever you think it is. You know what I mean? It's, the most important thing in the world should be at least the center of how you define yourself. So for me, when I lost most of my vision, I realized that sight is not the most important thing in the world. And in fact, unless the most important thing in the world to you is internal, then once that thing gets taken away, life is meaningless, right? So unless there's some bigger, more grand, more profound thing that means life to you, then anything you choose, be it money or health or whatever it is, once it's removed from you, your life becomes essentially meaningless. So it's like, if you have, if that most important thing gets taken away, you lose interest in life because you've decided that there's nothing valuable anymore. And I think to some people, when they see me or anybody who's anything, they go, I don't know how they do it. And that is a scary statement, not about me, but about the person, because they're saying, oh, that's what life means to me. See, when, life means so many other things. So the interest in life, the excitement about life, the joy about life, the sheer desire to jump out of bed in the morning, whatever takes that away from you is the disability. It's not blindness or whatever the case is. It's the robbing of that drive. You know what I mean? That's what that means.
So powerful. Andrew, when we were talking about this, you said something around the distribution of sensory function. Maybe a little bit more of a scientific way of describing this, but basically if something gets shut off to us, something else gets opened up to us. So long as we pay attention to that thing and lean into it, then we actually unlock unique capabilities or powers, and to Blessing's word, a unique experience, not a disability. I wonder if you might want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to acknowledge what you just said. Blessing was a far better way to put what I'm about to say. So you'll immediately notice that I'm mapping the neuroscience onto that, but it's almost eerie how accurately that description describes the biology, eerie in the best sense of the word. So our nervous system is inside of us. It has no access to the outside world, right? This freaks people out a little bit, but you're locked in a box. We're all locked in this body and this skull, and which part of us is a complicated discussion, but there is something unique about the real estate of the brain, right? In that, a finger can go a piece. Ultimately, our sense of self is all of us, and of course the way we live. But what's interesting is that nervous system has no knowledge of the outside world, right? And so it has to work with a certain set of what I call currencies, and these are chemical currencies. So these days you hear a lot of discussion about cryptocurrencies and dollars and euros and bitcoins and kind of thing, but there's only one currency for whether or not something feels good or not, and it's a chemical currency. And there are other molecules involved, but it's not an overstatement to say that dopamine is the currency of, is something worth pursuing? Does this feel good? Does this did it meet my expectations? Did it not meet my expectations? And that currency is not tethered to any sensory function. It is perfectly happy to take the beauty of a perfectly sounding note, which with certainty it was not played by me. I'm basically one of the or a beautiful work of art of any kind. And so whether or not it's tactile or whether or not it's auditory or whether or not it's visual, the currency, the chemical currency of joy and meaning and well-being has no bias. It truly doesn't. And this is the way we're wired, specifically so that as we change environments, as our body undergoes different changes, as our life circumstances undergo different changes, the beauty of this system is that it's meant to respond to any and all of those. And so, Blessing, when you describe someone saying, I don't know how you do it, you're right. They are saying, it's like someone saying, I only know how to sell apples at the corner of 5th and Market. And if, God forbid, they were to put a hot dog stand there, or I didn't have a bushel of apples, I literally could not sell any, I could not make a living, right? And it's such and that's the deprived situation, right? That view. Now, what's also interesting is that the nervous system has a remarkable ability that most people never get to experience, frankly. And based on your description of your path from, I guess in the clinical setting, we'd say from low vision to no vision. I don't know if you maintain any vision at all, but once you do that, sure, one sense has been essentially shut down or truncated, but very rapidly other senses expand. We know this. There's no territory in our nervous system that just sits idle. There are no empty lots in our nervous system. So immediately the real estate for hearing and for tactile experience and for blending different types of sensory experience expands. So it is absolutely accurate to be able to say that if somebody isn't sighted, they are actually have an expanded sensory experience of the world. It's just expanded in a different modality, as we say. And that gives access to unique abilities. And so I think, and just to briefly mention some of the data on this in very top contour form, the data show that after a removal or a reduction in one sensory modality, vision or hearing or touch or taste, the expansion in capability for other sensory functions happens within hours. I mean, this is one of the most rapid forms of plasticity that has ever been described. And so, so basically what I'm saying is two things. One is that our sense of happiness and well-being is not tied to any one particular type of experience or modality of experience. And our sense of the world is very much constrained by the senses that we rely on. And so if one is indeed shut down, then the nervous system opens up and rewires and creates new modalities. And I think that it's always interesting to hear how people think about low vision, no vision, and because my lab has been closely tied to this topic for a long time, I've had the great fortune of knowing some people, including Blessing, who have low vision or no vision, who their description of life is actually often much richer than the one that I'm familiar with. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, like, who's in the deprivation state here, and what can we do with that information? So those are my thoughts through the lens of neuroscience for the time being, anyway.
Amazing, Andrew. Blessing. I'm curious. I think we lost your video for a second, but I believe you're still up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We just can't see you. But how? I'm curious in hearing Andrew reflect back on that and what's going on from a neural systems standpoint or a nervous system standpoint. Do you feel like that's something that is true to you and you noticed in your experience, that as one portion of life, one door closed, other doors open, and you were able to walk through those to great effect?
It's funny. I not hesitate, but I seldom put it that way. But when I describe to people what kind of the transition of falling in love with music was, it was definitely this, okay, wow, all that energy that I would be running around with and being 10, it was still there. And the piano coming into our living room was all of a sudden this other port of access, this other way to pour that energy out. And as I did that, man, like what was before just, fine and fun just became this universe of an experience. And all I wanted to do was play it, do it more and more and more. And like, how does that happen? How does that work? And I just got into this mode where I don't remember one time anybody saying to me, Blessing, did you practice today? Because even to this day, it's just, I could play the same chords over and over again and hear different things every time. and different songs pop into my head and this, that, and the other thing, not to be super cliche, but it is, I would agree 100%, just in the sense that obviously the brain learns to enjoy something differently, but even on a deeper level, I would say life is made to carry on, so to speak. So there's another sense where, with all that energy as I was a kid, that I had to find where to use. As soon as I found what was joyful, like I couldn't stop, because my entire being was like, we still want to be a kid. So here's another place to pour that energy in. That childish, joyful exuberance can also still go here and give us the same dopamine rush, so to speak.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I love the framing of like the child rush. And you said something again when we were talking a few days ago, that the act of getting better at music is my destination. I love the process, and if you love what you're doing, success is a byproduct. So is that part of the rewarding the process and the joy of creation and discovery and the novelty and just pouring your energy into that? Is that what fuels you and how you do what you do?
Yeah, for me, there is a, and I mean, this took time to realize, but it dawned on me that if fast forward a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, I'm gonna go ahead and say when money is not an issue, I would still wake up and run to the piano. Like it's not even a question of if, it's just, or the guitar, or to a session, or whatever have you. And if all of this went away tomorrow, I would still wake up and run to the piano or the guitar or a session or whatever have you. Everybody around me keeps hearing me going, oh my God, my voice is coming back, because allergy season in Nashville is the worst. And I keep saying, when I have allergies on my vocal cords, it feels like a kid who has like a broken toy. You're like, there's so many things I want to do with it that I can't do because these allergies are in my, and they're finally going away. And all I want to do is go sing songs, because all of a sudden my full instrument is coming back and I missed it, you know? So, and that's, no one's watching me when I'm practicing, but I'm still there and it's still life and I'm still loving it. And that is kind of the process reward, is like, this is what I love to do. Now, I feel like, you know, a lot of cliches tend to be true. So it's like, if you love what you do, you're not really working. You know, when I look on my calendar, you know, my days are booked through at this point mid-November, and yet I don't go, man, I have so much work ahead of me. I go, I have so many sessions to do, you know? So it's just finding that thing that makes your brain click and makes you feel that rush of dopamine or life or whatever have you. And then all of a sudden the process is the destination, and vice versa, you know? It's
amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I guess it just underscores the point that when you define what the most important thing in the world is, and if it's internal and it's the right thing, then you can reward that process.
Yes.
And the outcomes take care of themselves. Certainly something we talk a lot about at Madefor. Very, very cool. I love that. There was something else that maybe pivot a bit, and then I want to come back to the songwriting and the the craft of that, and also
Absolutely.
Just music in general and why music can be so moving to people. But before we get there, you said something else that I found really powerful, that you said, everyone you meet is going through a great battle. If you can be kind, kindness promotes understanding and learning, and you discovered that there isn't just one way to do battle. I'm curious where kindness has served you well, both towards yourself or towards others in your journey.
Pat, I remember telling you about the audition for The Voice. And, you know, as I was watching it with my friends, and I heard that travesty. And, you know, luckily at the end of it, literally, I was like, you know, Blessing, if you don't just go for this, you know, it might not work well. So I just dug really deep in the bag of tricks and did a bunch of runs, and the chairs turned. So that was fine. But like in that moment, I went, this sounds really bad, but you know, we're going to be all right. You know what I mean? Like, 18 million people just watched this, but they'll forget in a week. And to this day, people walk up to me at airports and go, were you on The Voice? I'm like, oh my God, which episode did you see? Because I may deny it. But it's not the end of the world. It never really is. The only thing that's the end of the world is the end of the world. So, but just that moment of going, okay, that happened. And here we are. And just realizing that not everything is in your control. Like, I played a festival yesterday, and when I got on stage, it sounded very different from sound check. And, I could bemoan the fact that, like, things didn't work, blah, 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 blah. Or here's a giant crowd of people and they're here to hear me sing, and I just want to have fun with them, and it's going to be fine. You know what I mean? So there's just things you can choose to focus on to make a moment better, or things you can choose to focus on to literally make it the worst moment ever. And that's every day. You can decide that, your coffee spilling on you really just ruins your life. And you know what? Then it did. Or you can be like, you know what? Coffee spills, there are washing machines for these pants, etc. So I think it's just again, I must sound so cheesy, you guys, but perspective is the biggest strength in the world,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that sounds cheesy at all. And I think even just it's something we talk a lot about with our members, and that you never, and something I've grown appreciative of over the last couple of years in working with all of our members, is that everyone is dealing with something. Everyone's got something they're navigating, unique challenge, circumstance, whatever it is. And if you can meet that person with just a little bit of kindness, and that kindness can be an entry point to understanding, and maybe even a shifting of your perspective, and a learning that you can maybe internalize and bring back into your own life to help you navigate your situation better. And so that doesn't have to come in forms big, can come in forms that are small. And so
it's forgive me, I always tell people that when you see me and you say, oh, Blessing's blind, all of a sudden, if I accidentally kick you or run into you, you go, oh, he's blind. He didn't mean to do that. And so I think, controversial, hot take, I think being physically, obviously, quote unquote, disabled is easier than having what in the community is known as an invisible disability. Because if you see somebody in a wheelchair, you get it. You take a minute to hold the door. You do whatever, unless you're a sociopath, you do whatever you need to do to, like, make their life a little easier. But everyone, everywhere, all the time is dealing with something that is the equivalent of being blind or being in a wheelchair or being deaf or whatever have you. And I feel like when you walk around and you, like, yell at the guy that's driving like an idiot or whatever the case is, like, it sounds really weird to be like, just picture that guy with a cane or in a wheelchair with hearing it. Just like, he's disabled somehow. It might be that he's got anger issues. It might be that he's bipolar or whatever the case might be. There's no one you meet that is quote unquote perfect. You know what I mean? Or without some internal battle that they're fighting. For me, honestly, being blind is infinitely easier, because again, it's like somebody sees you and they go, okay, duly noted. Here's how I'm going to help him, or here's how I'm going to be extra graceful to this moment and this person. And I wish that everybody could see everybody in that same way, because, I just think that's half the battle, is realizing that,
it's such a great perspective. That's amazing. Okay. I want to shift a little bit. You said something recently. I think it was recently. I heard it somewhere that
Pat, I say so much. I'm so sorry.
Blessing, you're dropping like gems everywhere. So I try to pick up as many as I can. But you said something, and this goes into songwriting. And so shift gears a little bit, because I think this is a really interesting topic. And I'm going to come to Andrew next on this. But you said that a song has to be emotionally legitimate, communicating without words in order to be effective. What do you mean by that? And does that inform how you go about writing music and delivering music?
In my humble opinion, music is the most powerful thing in the world, bar none. my God. Can I give you a Thomas Aquinas quote? I'm so sorry.
Please throw it out there.
Thomas Aquinas says, "He who sings prays twice." I never get to talk like this in front of most people, so this is actually really exciting. And that is powerful just in the fact that there's something intangibly, indescribably, powerfully, innately alive about music. And so combining music with words is just like saying the same thing 10 levels deeper, you know what I mean? So even if you hear, why don't you fill me up, buttercup, baby, just let me down. Like, you're not only hearing the words, but it's hitting something in you that makes you smile, you know what I mean? So it's just like, yeah, it is even the most pointless bubblegum thing is talking to you on a level deeper than you realize. And for better and for worse. So when you hear music that's saying something dark or negative or not, I guess, for lack of a better word, promoting good things, it is seeping into you, you know, and without realizing it, you can kind of start pulling yourself in that direction. John Lennon, when he wrote Imagine, said, you know, if you said the lyrics to Imagine, two people, they would say, you're a communist. And he goes, yeah, I am a communist. He goes, all I did was write the Communist Manifesto in a song and put honey in it. And so most people sing the song Imagine and don't stop and think, what does this really say? And I guarantee you most people that sing the song Imagine don't actually agree with what the song is saying, but it's got enough honey in it that it like bypasses like the cerebral awareness and like you just take it in, right? Whether you agree or not is almost secondary. He makes you say it. So it's like a really deeply powerful instrument, you know?
Wow. It I think underscores again another gem from you where you said words are powerful, but words paired with music are unstoppable. And I come to maybe Andrew, you next. I'm curious, like when you hear Blessing talking about that it's got to be emotionally legitimate and that it's moving us and registering in both our brain and our body in different ways. Like, how do you think about it as from the lens of neuroscience in terms of what's happening when we're listening to music and why can it be so moving for us?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my video here, but anyway, maybe it's just that. There we go. Doesn't really matter.
Touche,
you know, yeah, it doesn't matter.
That's good perspective, buddy.
You know, it's so the neuroscience of music is something that people have explored, and here again, you know, it obviously music is in every culture since the beginning of as far back as we know, and there do seem to be some general themes there that the emotion system, and especially the intersection of the emotion and the memory systems are so powerfully gated by music. And of course, you know, language isn't in all forms of music, but you know, language can be very powerful, but how things are spoken, right, are the most primitive form of words in communication, right? I mean, there are so many uterations of the vocal cords that can convey pain, pleasure, cooperation, fear. I mean, those are our most primal way of communicating is certainly through these patterns of intonation. And how musical notes and motifs, you know, trigger these different pathways is still an area that you know, there's a lot of ideas about and a lot of investigation of. What's interesting is that, you know, not all of us know when something sounds right, and we do have varying levels of tone and pitch perception, but most everyone knows when something doesn't sound right, when there's something off there. And I think that, so there's this somewhat still mysterious relationship between music, emotion, memory, and math. I mean, notes are how notes are spaced is as important as how loudly they're played and the order in which they're played, right? I mean, I'm outside my wheelhouse because I'm not a musician, but it's clear that there's a structure to music, and that structure is really in many ways, because it relies on math, whether or not you're looking at it through the lens of math or not. That really, what that says is that that's really the arithmetic of our soulful experience, of our memory and our emotion. And I think that unlike other forms of sensory experience, like smells, for instance, there's some smells universally evoke disgust. Just universally, there's never been an example of somebody who somehow prefers these putrid smells, or what smells good, can vary, but there are some universals there. Freshly baked bread, whether or not you like bread or not, can have a very that smell evokes an insulin release in the body. So that's kind of hardwired. But when you think about music, a lot of that too relates to our own history. The music that we hear and that is meaningful for us at certain stages of life is like it's like an indelible marker of what we care about. And what's so cool about it is that even when lyrics are attached to music, there's the underlying tones and frequencies are what are creating. It's like setting the stage for the words to have their full impact. So, we are a storytelling species for sure. But before we were a storytelling species, we were an utterance species. And all along, we've done that with music. There's no question about that. Now, whether or not other animals use music the same is an interesting one. Obviously, bird song is one that comes to mind, and whale songs and things of that sort. But among all the animals, we have the most varied expressions of music, at least as far as we know. So it's a big part of who we are as a species. And you can't say that for every other species. Crickets communicate through sound, but they don't vary the way the sounds that they use to communicate different things. So yeah, music has real, let's just say there is not just one area, but there's a lot of real estate in us, in our brains and bodies that use this. And one thing that I'd love to ask you about, Blessing, is, these days there's a lot of interest in breath and breath work and respiration, something my lab and I'm really interested in. But what's been shown recently, there were two studies that are really cool. One doesn't have to do with music, but I think you'll immediately understand why I'm bringing this up. The study that just came out that showed that when people hear a story, even if those people are located in different rooms or even different buildings or even different places, that their heart rates synchronize and their breathing synchronizes in hearing the story. Now that's powerful, because that means that the story is translated into a physiological signature in our body. And it's absolutely clear that music does the same. And we have the diaphragm to generate breath. But one thing that's kind of an open area of investigation now is whether or not, for instance, when you sing, whether or not it creates resonance in the diaphragm of the listener. And what that means then is it's conceivable that people who are musical, like you, are actually communicating through the nervous system. And so this is sub-language, right? This is at the level of feeling. And anyway, just some ideas to think about.
That's amazing.
It's pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
Because to just map this division for a second, if you and I were to see the same thing, I actually don't know your experience of seeing anything, right? Right, because you could see before. This makes sense, yes. Right? So, but if or hearing, I don't know what your experience of hearing something is. But if we both feel the same thing in our body at heart rate, breathing, then that means that that's one of the fundamental chords by which humans connect. and no pun intended with chords there, just like
Right.
physical. Yeah. So I think these are newer data. They're not from my lab, but I think it's so interesting. And we know that other animals do this, like fish school by reading out the electrical signals of the bodies of the fish next to them. And humans school, so to speak, in a social sense. And we've known that when, parents and babies will synchronize heartbeats, but never before have we thought until now that stories and music could synchronize our bodily experience. And that what's cool is we can measure that. Like, even if we were all to look at it or listen to the same thing,
Right.
There's no way to know your subjective experience. But when it comes to heart rate and breathing, we can measure that in an objective way. Yeah, exactly.
Does that mean that there is some objective thing that sound is tapping into from one person to another? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, does that somehow mean that there is an element of reality that is the same, that both people are accessing, so much so that it can have a physiologically like synchronous effect?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that makes sense. So it's a great question. You're asking a neuroscientist this. So I'm going to say yes, because nervous systems, as different as we all are, and as wonderful as that is, that we're all so different, we are all playing with the same basic elements of chemicals and cells that, there's no, somehow some of us have a little bit more of this or a little bit less of that, right. But there's, to our knowledge, there's no, like, it's not like some people get a different chemical for pleasure or calm or relaxation or a different mechanism. So I think it's very likely tapped into a fundamental module of, and I'm, some people think, I've heard somebody say this, and I never forgot this, and this isn't me, this isn't my experience of life, but that they think in feels, that when they try to think, they actually experience that as purely bodily sensations. Some people are just more in tune with that. Other people less so.
That's wild.
Andrew, is it a bridge too far to say that just in the same manner that we entrain to the light in our environment, we're entraining to the rhythms in our environment as well? And so if it's those patterns are coming through music, then our body is in some way syncing with that, and it's being reflected in the signatures of our heart rate and breathing, and then the associations that we have with particular song. I'm seeing some comments come in on the side around different songs have different effects for different people, but the associations may be unique, but the biological signatures are the same because we're all in training to the same sounds that we're hearing. Does that at all make sense, or not really? You can discard it.
Yeah. So no, it does, and it brings us to something that brings us right out to the most important thing to understand about the nervous system is that the nervous system takes physical events in the universe that will never change, and it takes those and it converts them into a language of electricity and chemicals, right? So photons of light, sound waves. I mean, as obvious as it is, I mean, what's incredible about sound is, for instance, Blessing or Pat or anyone else on the Zoom, you're speaking and it's creating sound waves into your speaker coming out of my speaker, and my eardrum basically is translating that for the neurons into drum beats, and I'm making sense of it. And I don't know how much sense I'm making to you, but presumably some. And so that's amazing. That's literally a drum in your ear that's converting this into a kind of a Morse code, and then the brain unlocks what that means. And it's so wild to think about, but that's just because sound waves are the way in which we hear. And you hear that and you go, okay, well, of course, but it's that way for each of the sensory modalities. And so everything needs to be translated into a physical and then a chemical and an electrical signal. And this, again, if you go too far down this rabbit hole, it can be a little eerie, because you start to realize that everything, right down to your experience of life, not to remove any of the spiritual or more important aspects of life, but you can't live in this thought pattern that I'm talking about right now too long, or you'll lose your mind. or everything will just seem a little bit, it's a very reductionist view, but it's okay to enter that room and then walk out and just know that it's there. Sometimes it can be useful that these are literally electrical and chemical signals, right? So I think that it's not too much of a stretch. And so rather than, I would say a reductionist view lets you, a lot of people think a reductionist view of that kind actually deprives us of some of the beauty of how things, but I think that there's another stance to take, which is that, I mean, how amazing is that? And that, that's actually what binds us all. That's the one place where we can absolutely say that we are all dealing with the exact same deck of cards. And so to me, it's a linker, not a break between each of us and our reality.
Andrew, Claire asked a question. I'm going to combine two questions. Claire and Karen both had questions that came in.
Yeah.
And I think it very much ties into this topic of how we're processing music. But Claire asked, when we close our eyes, can our focus improve because it's one less place we're putting our attention to simultaneously? So is it more powerful to listen to music with our eyes closed? Do we capture more? And kind of dovetailing off of that, do the enhancements when something gets shut off get spread out evenly across our senses, or do we have some ability to direct it to a particular sense, or are they skewed one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, I like to joke that if ever somebody wants excessive eye contact, you should just let them know, I'm happy to give that to you, but I won't hear as much of what you're saying, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending. So when we, we each have a primary sensory modality. So for most people, it's vision, and for some people, it's hearing, and for some people, it's touch, and it depends on what you rely on, right? As Blessing can attest to, right? And he's done he can speak to this more than I can, of course, but in terms of the shift presumably towards hearing, and I don't tactile presumably as well. Smell. I mean, I think all your senses probably got a boost, but presumably you rely on some more than others, as we all do. So I think that, but yeah, when you close your eyes, you are in a better place to hear and listen for sure, and to extract more meaning from what you hear and what you're listening to, because you're literally dedicating more neural real estate to that. And so, there's a place and for each of the sensory modalities, obviously, but yeah, if someone says, look at me and listen to me, they're sending contradictory signals. Yeah.
I feel like I heard you say it before, Andrew. The worst thing you can tell your kid is look at me when I'm talking to you, because then they're not going to hear what you're saying. So
yeah, you should tell them, shut your eyes and just listen to what I'm saying, and let it land on the shelf in there.
Oh my God, it's amazing. All right, well, we've got about 5 minutes left. We covered a lot of ground, and Blessing again, and Andrew both, and to all of our members that are here, thank you so much for being here. I want to give Blessing and Andrew a chance to leave us with any takeaways. Blessing, you dropped so many really just amazing things, but I'm curious, is there one thing that you would want to leave everyone that's listening to with, knowing that this is about coming off of this, feeling inspired, but ultimately like getting into action? Like, what's that one thing you're going to do to bring out the best in you or those around you? What would you say to?
I would say two things pop into my head. Thing one is, even if it's not what you can do for a living, find what you love and do it a lot, because that rejuvenates you. I'm lucky enough that my work is my love and vice versa. So I would say, my uncle is an attorney, but he loves tennis. So, he has a great intellectual aptitude for law, but also when he's done with that, what he loves is to play tennis. And then I think, last but not least, I'm really bad at advice giving, but I just the idea that to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is a really powerful ability, like empathy and just that human ability to say, I wonder what that person's feeling, and just to take another second to wonder if whatever critique you might have of that person would be would be better kept in your head, just for the sheer possibility that maybe where they are right now, that's the best they can do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's powerful. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Blessing. Andrew, what would you like people to walk away with?
Well, you know, I, to be honest, I'm always happy if people are willing to just take a few moments whenever in an experience that is either uncomfortable or is really wonderful to them. And, you know, I hear I'm heavily biased, but I think to think about this amazing, you know, organ system that we have that filters out our experience. But I think in hearing Blessing today and talking about his experience of life and what he's doing and what brings him meaning, I'm personally thinking a lot about, you know, neuroscience has had a lot to say about how nervous systems work and filter the world and all the stuff I've been blabbing about, but, you know, it hasn't spent a lot of time thinking about how nervous systems interact. And I think that that's the next level of understanding that we all look forward to, at least in the field of neuroscience. And I think that, yeah, thinking about how there are some universal elements through which we all translate our life experience, and yet how we're all doing that slightly differently or very differently. And so, you know, I guess the analogy that I'll use here is one that I hope is appropriate for now, which is that it's sort of like two people who have learned very different styles of music, right? And they decide they're going to get together and jam. I think that's the appropriate word. Okay. And you know, it might take some time. They're going to find that place where they both are translating the world similarly and can work together. But, you know, we have this expectation. We go through life and we sort of think, oh, you know, I do things this way and we expect other people to do things that way. And I think we are in a place nowadays where we're hopefully more sensitive to people's differences. But I don't think that we're yet thinking about those differences as like, maybe we are all working with the same elements, the same deck of cards, but some of those cards are flipped over, and that's great. And for certain people, and some people are playing one card game and some people are playing another. And so I think when we understand how we're different in terms of how we each filter life experience, I think there's great understanding to be had there. And again, neuroscience has absolutely nothing to say about how to approach that yet. Maybe someday it will, but I'm certainly going to be thinking about that and coming away from this conversation, because if there is any truth about the human experience, is that if we want to, we can place ourselves into another person's mindset, or at least try. And I think that to me seems like a really fun experiment.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Andrew. So good. All right, we're at 5 o'clock. I promise I'll be brief. My one public service announcement, and maybe the best thing that I'll say during this entire Basecamp is, if you haven't had a chance to listen to Blessing, go on Spotify and listen to Hallelujah. Blessing just put out this Christmas song, and I don't typically listen to Christmas songs in September, and I don't think it matters like what your faith is or religion, or just, it is a powerful, moving song. And I gotta imagine if there's a crowd of people listening to that song, their bodies are all vibrating in just the right way. So check that out. That's my one public service announcement. I think my takeaway, you know, so many good takeaways from this, but I think something that you said, Blessing, that just around this idea that you define the most important thing in the world, and it comes from inside you, and so you have this choice that there's always an opportunity in a unique experience, so long as you find that. And I love the fact that you highlighted, like, find what you love and do that. And so whether you're calling that an intention, a vision, a mission, whatever feels right to you that comes from the inside, that you have the ability to take steps towards or exert control around, do that and see where it goes. I think, I just think that is such a powerful way to live. And I'm so glad you shared that message. I'm so grateful for all of you for being here, for making time. I think this community is exceptional. The fact that everyone here has an orientation towards growth and not only growing the good in themselves, but growing the good in the world around them. It's a powerful, powerful way of being. And I'm just so thankful for the work that you're doing to that end. So thank you, Blessing. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I look forward to connecting again soon. Next month, we have, this will be a surprise to Andrew, but we have Lisa Feldman Barrett is going to join for our Basecamp next month. She is in amongst the top 1% cited scientists in the world, amazing neuroscientist, psychologist. And one of the things that she talks a lot about is the fact that we regulate each other's nervous systems for good or for bad. So we're not designed to independently regulate our nervous system, which I think ties to a lot of what we talked about today, whether it's coming through music or relationships or however we're engaging with one another. So looking forward to that conversation and can't wait to see you all again soon. So thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, guys.